I got out of the Marine Corps because I wanted to have a family. Amazon and KDP gave me the opportunity to have that family and more. I got started as a writer because I wasn't really happy with what I was doing. Never in a million years did I think that I even qualified to be a writer.
I started out actually as a lawyer, and I had a story that just would not leave my head, and found my passion for writing.
I became an autism advocate, started writing for mom magazines, and just kind of cathartically started writing a romance novel. And I ended up with a 4-book deal with one of the big 5 New York publishers.
I became a writer just by writing stories when I was a kid. Put it aside for years and years, became a musician.
I'm a scientist. I got started writing these books when I became pregnant with my daughter. It was a game changer. She needs to know this stuff.
What appealed to me about self-publishing was the creative control.
You don't need permission from anybody. You don't need a gatekeeper to tell you if your book is good enough or not.
KDP felt like a great way for me to reach a broad audience, and I saw the advantage of also keeping more of my royalties.
I have a laptop, I can travel, and I can upload anywhere around the world.
I could put a book on today, and tomorrow it was on the market.
And that's brilliant because let's say the first few hundred readers tell you the same thing they didn't like about a character. You can go online and change that thing, and you can do it all sitting at home with a dog sleeping on your feet.
Those first sales, I kind of didn't even believe it.
Without any advertising, without spending any money, I'm already getting sales. That's freaking amazing.
I remember looking at the reports on KDP and realizing I'd made more as a writer than I had as a musician.
I made more in a day than I had made on my entire contract with 4 books.
KDP has given me an amazing life. I get to have fun. Right now, I'm living my dream, quite literally.
It empowers you. You can have your own business and run it how you really see fit.
Seeing women who are literally building their own empires through self-publishing is incredibly empowering.
I can see myself becoming a full-time indie author, and I think I can do it within the next few years. That would be amazing. It would mean I could stay home with my daughter.
The best advice I can give any new author is just to write.
Being an indie author can happen at any time in your life. My first book, I was writing in my late 40s. I'm 51 now on my 10th book.
5, 10, 15 minutes a day, write some words down to set a goal every day.
I think that a lot of marginalized voices have been muted in traditional publishing. We're saying if you won't give us a seat at your table, then we'll make our own. And that's what self-publishing has done for a lot of us.
I've heard so many just horrible stories about, being turned down for years. I'm just like, why? Why would you do that to yourself? Just self-publish.
KDP is easy.
KDP gives me hope.
KDP is freedom.
KDP is life-changing.
I think KDP is the best thing that's happened to writers and readers in the last 100 years.
Hey, is Adam frozen?
Adam! He's frozen.
Oh.
Adam's not saying anything. Oh no.
Yeah, I was like, Adam? What happened? What did I miss?
You just being frozen in the best position imaginable. A
Oh,
great start to our
You're like
show.
reading. You're clearly reading your phone. Oh God! I'm like. This
Oh
is too
my
much.
God.
Morning.
Oh, good
Scared him.
morning.
I'm-
Wow, we're on air, and this is like the first thing people see.
Well, I mean, we warned everyone that it would be collapsed. So here we are. Good morning, everyone. Or good afternoon,
Good
or
morning.
good evening. Well, thank you all so much to everyone who's like checking in for our panel on queerness and speculative fiction. I think to start off, we should all just like go around names, pronouns, and what our books are about. And does anyone want to go first? Cool.
Sure,
I will
I'll
go.
go first.
Who are you?
Oh no, I'll go first. Yeah, yeah, Adam.
Okay. All right. So I'm Adam Silvera. My pronouns are he, him, and my most recent.
Oh no. They're like, no, absolutely not. Cool. I just got to pick up
They're
where.
like my most
where
recent
Adam-
book is.
you got it.
All right,
hi,
Mark,
everyone.
take it over.
I'm Mark Oshiro. I'm the author of my first book is Anger is a Gift, which is not speculative fiction. So I'm going to be talking about my newest novel, Each of Us a Desert, which is a YA fantasy novel. Enemies to lovers, very sapphic, extremely gay and queer in many, many different ways. And then in my pronouns, I use they, them, or he, him alternately. I am non-binary. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to tag in. Let's do Patrice next.
I'm so sorry. I'm like so collecting myself. So my name is Patrice Caldwell. I'm the editor of Phoenix First Must Burn, which is, I'm like, where's the camera angle here? Oh my God. I do understand technology. I'm the editor of Phoenix First Must Burn. It's an anthology of 16 stories of Black girl magic, resistance, and hope. And it's also really queer. Like literally that was actually the greatest thing. All of our reviews, our trade reviews were like, delightfully queer, and I was like, I'm glad that you picked up on it. So there's a lot of Black authors, and it's also very, very queer as well.
Incredible.
And yeah, that's it.
My name is
Aiden.
Aiden Thomas. I am the author of Cemetery Boys, and my pronouns are he and they. I am also non-binary on the non-binary squad.
Oh my gosh, my pronouns are she, her. Well, that's what I get for laughing so hard.
Adam, welcome back. Did you want
No.
Okay.
It's all you.
Wait, has everyone gone?
No.
I haven't yet, but you were
Great.
Yeah, go ahead. Go.
Okay. So I'm Corinne Duyvis. Pronouns are she, her, and my most recent book is The Art of Saving the World, which is about a questioning asexual lesbian with anxiety who has to save the world with the help of several alternate universe versions of herself. And I'm in the Netherlands, and it is definitely evening here.
I was gonna say, it looks dark.
Yeah.
Evening.
Awesome. At what point did I get cut off?
When you said I'm
Pretty
the
much.
author of my most recent
Yeah,
book.
right there.
Like, what did you write? What the fuck?
Right. They were like, bleep.
Okay, well, I'm going to be real fast. I'm the author of Infinity Sun, my most recent book, which comes out in paperback on December 1st. This is the first time anyone's seen it.
Oh my God. Yay, the paperback.
Yeah, I'm really excited. It has a chapter of like the sequel anyway, but it follows two brothers and explores what happens when one brother gets powers and the other one doesn't. And spoiler, it's the gay brother who gets powers, so that's how you know it's incredible. But yeah, I'm so excited to be chatting queerness and speculative fiction with you guys. Like, what sort of, I guess, the earliest moments you remember actually like seeing queerness in speculative fiction, whether it was a TV show or a comic book or a book? What was your experience?
For me, the first one was, I think the first thing I remember, which Adam, I know you feel similarly about this, was, because I'm looking at my bookshelf of the book right now, was, oh, now I'm going to get the title wrong. The Shadow Hunters. Yeah, thank you, City of Bones. Yeah, I think it was City of Bones. You know, I think Malik, seeing that like couple happen over the course of that series was like so freaking awesome for me. And then when like the TV series came out and then like seeing it there, the movie, you know, I think that was just like super cool to be like, wow, like here's this couple and one of them's bisexual, one's, you know, gay. And it's just like, that's just it. They do like badass shit together, and that's just like super normal for them. And that was really cool thing to see as a teen.
I love too that it didn't shy away from real world issues either. Like obviously, I think a lot of like great speculative fiction does reflect on reality, and you know, like there is homophobia within like the shadow hunter cultures and everything. And Alex definitely like feels that weight, and it really was just like so beautiful watching him fall in love with this like bisexual warlock. And really just
he's so like, hot and like
we can be kick-ass. We can be like the demon hunter too. So I love that so much.
I love my priorities are like, yeah, he's really hot. He's really hot.
I think one of the earliest, most of the ones that I remember actually weren't in YA. It was Fledgling by Octavia Butler, which is queer in such a very interesting way. And then also the work of
weird.
Yeah, it's real weird. What's his name? China Miéville, who does a lot of adult fiction, like speculative fiction or whatnot. And what I liked about China Medieval stuff is the world was clear. It wasn't just the characters. It was just the way that like he thought about gender and the way he thought about sexuality and the way it was woven into the fabric of world building, which was super influential. And like I relied on that a lot when I started writing fantasy. Was like, oh, you can just make the world clear. It doesn't just have to be the characters.
Yeah.
I think for me, the first time ever was probably Willow and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. That, of course, ended poorly. In fiction, first time was probably comic books. X-Men had a couple of really great queer characters. But if you're talking specifically YA, I think it must have been Melinda Lowe's Ash.
Yeah, that was also the first one for me too, for sure. Melinda Lowe's Ash.
Yeah, Corinne just stole both my answers is what happened. But yeah, like exactly, it was for me. It was Buffy, and then Ash was the first like book that I read, and Ash was life changing.
It was.
If you're gonna talk like
Melinda Lowe has
YA,
this
you have to talk about Melinda Lowe.
Totally.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And she has experience. So she had Ash, but I'm trying to look. She had Ash and she had Huntress, which for me, so like Ash, I loved Ash, and Ash was like everything for me. But then Huntress, because being such a fantasy person, that was the one. It's like epic fantasy standalone, in which like these two girls get tasked to do a thing. They go on this journey together, and it was like, to me, I was like, I didn't know. That was when I was like, wow, like, you know, because that one was also like so steeped in her own culture and all these things, and I was like, wow, like it was a fantasy novel, I think, truly before its time, you know, where it was like, you know, like just absolutely fantastic, and I was like, wow, this is like something you can do in fantasy. It's like, and you can get published doing it.
I remember feeling similarly with Alex London's Proxy duology.
Oh my god, yes.
You know, because like while it was really great to have Alec and Magnus and City of Bones, like at the end of the day, they are still kind of like secondary characters, and then to like have Sid be the protagonist in Proxy, and then to like also watch his story evolve in Guardian, which I actually like. I love both those books, and it's one of the few sequels that I actually love more than the original novel, and it really was just so. And of course now with like Black Wings Beating, which is like my favorite of like Alex London's works and everything, I'm really excited about the direction that we are moving in with like queer speculative fiction in YA. Like I mean, when I did the launch for Cemetery Boys with Aiden, like Aiden was like talking about gay Titanic in space, which Aiden just recently sold. And
put it into the world, Aiden. You made it happen.
I want all of that. I want our queerness in every single angle of speculative fiction. So I'm really excited to see gay Titanic in space and what the hell that looks like.
Well, I think it's also interesting because we can talk about it now. Like if you look at like what was happening in YA 10 years ago, like you weren't seeing marketing terms talking about queerness being used. Like it was like such a struggle to find the books. And it was, we'd have to go to, you know, like, I think about what like Dahlia Adler has done with LGBTQ reads and having like a directory, but for a long time, that was like the only place we could find it. Like
it was like the almost a whisper network.
Yeah. That's a perfect way of explaining it.
And also, it's so interesting, right? Because you say that, I mean, I'm thinking about, you mentioned Proxy, right? Which I love Proxy. And I think it was because I was on online spaces. I knew it was queer, but that's something I talked to Alex about, like the idea of like on like Proxy, when you read the copy, right? It was one of those things where it's like, it's not super obvious that you're going in the book that's gonna be like really gay, but then obviously as soon as you start reading it, you're like, well, this is real gay, like, you know? And so I think that's, but I think about the change, you know, I'm thinking about like, you know, from Proxy to Black Wings Beating, or from like so many different books, the idea of like moving into this thing where it's like, we can start having these conversations and it's there and it's no big deal. You know, I mean, like literally my agent told my first like novel, fantasy novel, it's just like, I was kind of thinking about it when she pitched it. She literally pitched the book as like Black lesbian vampires, and she told me that she pitched it like that after the fact, and I was like really nervous. Hopefully she's not watching this. I didn't tell her that, but I was like, oh, like why would you pitch it like that? You know, I mean, there's not that many like lesbian book, and there's also like I was like, great, thank you for like, you know, obviously it's sold, but it's one of those things where like I love that that's a thing now, where like editors were like, oh, that was the thing I loved about it, you know? And I think that's just like really far to go. I feel like as someone who's kind of like, a lot of us, we've all been here around here for a long time. And to see the industry get to this point is like honestly really remarkable. And honestly, the fact that we're having this panel and like, look at us, we're all so diverse, you know? And I feel like that's huge.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, especially, you know, how you were just talking about Proxy Patrice with like how you didn't know from the get-go that it was like going to be gay. And I think that's such a unique experience that like queer readers get to have, because I think about how when I was 18, 19 and interested in queerness, but not out yet and wasn't trying to be seen browsing the LGBTQ section because
I agree.
I felt like that would out me. Whereas like I'm reading City of Bones and I stumble upon queer characters. And I think that with genre fiction, we do get that opportunity to access queer readers who can't always like publicly. Like I think about the cover for What If It's Us, which I co-wrote with Becky Albertalli, where it's like two cute boys checking each other out. Like there are a lot of teens who cannot bring that book home because of that cover, you know? Whereas like Infinity Son, like this Phoenix is not making out with like another Phoenix. Like it's fine. You know?
I mean, that...
Well, now wait a second.
Where's that cover?
Yeah, right. We're gonna call Andrew.
Bring it
like,
back.
listen, you tried.
Redo the paperback.
Missed opportunity for the paperback.
It's like we do the cover. But you know, but I really do think that it is this like opportunity for readers to actually get to read about queer characters in a way that doesn't have to sort of like out them to anyone. So
I agree.
Yeah, because I mean, we could talk about our opportunities to be able to be open about this stuff right now, but we do still have that unique challenge where not every reader, especially teenagers who are coming to our books, are out or have the funds to go buy their own books and everything. And it's tricky.
No, I mean, I completely agree. I think like it's one of those things where like it's like this weird balance you have to strike, you know, like with Phoenix with my anthology, like we like, you know, I mean, there's nothing on here that says like that. Oh, that's not true. Like, well, maybe.
No, you're
I'm like, wow, guys, it's been a really long time. Okay.
Not in March.
Because at one point, no, that's what I thought. We put on the copy gender nonconforming. So I guess like there is that in the inside flap, you know. But that was something, you know, and that was something really important to me because I think like that's really important to not erase those identities, you know. But I also still think it's one of those things where it's there for readers, but it's not something that's like, you know, overtly in your face. And that was really important to me because I wanted a book that like I could have read when I was younger, you know? Mm-hmm. And like, I don't know, like gay rainbows on the cover might not have been.
Corinne?
I think that's one of the really great things of where we are right now, though, because we're getting so much more queer fiction. We're slowly moving into that stage where we can just say like, hey, we have more of it. Because like with secondary fantasy worlds or any queer speculative fiction, I know in the past there's often been that discussion of should we have secondary worlds where queerness is not an issue, or should we have like secondary worlds where it might be an issue and it might be more familiar. And the answer was always, we need both. We need more of everything. And we are slowly moving toward that. And I think with covers and such, it's the same, because it's really important to have these like stealth covers where kids who are not queer or are not openly queer can pick up these books and then maybe slowly encounter themselves. But it's also really important to have these covers where the queerness is open and explicit, because even if a closeted kid can't pick up the book, I think walking into a bookstore or library and then seeing a book cover like David Levithan's Two Boys Kissing is really, really powerful. Even if they can't pick it up, they know it's there, they see themselves, and I think that matters a lot too. So I think having both is so important. I'm really glad we're moving closer to that stage.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Oh, go ahead, Aiden.
I don't think I've ever felt more powerful than when I first saw this cover. So just kind of talking about that kind of representation, and like I understand the need for like both, just like Corinne said, but like this was like life-changing for me. So yeah.
I remember when like literally all of Twitter was like, that cover got revealed and everyone was like, oh my God, like, do you see this cover? Like, it's so clearly trans. Like, it's like amazing, you know? And like, everyone was just like losing their minds over like how far we've come as an industry. That like, this is a cover, you know?
I shared that cover with people who are not in this industry. Like, I'm just like, please look at this like gorgeous piece of art, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a piece of art.
Yeah.
And with that, I'm also clear that we're moving more towards like the characters being represented, because in the past, a lot of like trans-themed book were mostly like signified with like Venus and Mars symbols and that kind of thing, and it's really nice to just focus on the actual character more. And yeah, I know.
I mean, that's something I love about,
like that is beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, Cemetery Boys, I mean, that's some of the great things. I'm like, oh, duh, you had it right there. I'm like looking at my shelf. You can just show the cover. Yeah, I think it's so great to have like the boys on the cover, you know? And like, sure, it's not like hinting, but I love that, you know? And I love that, like, the moment you open that flap, it's like, okay, you see these people on the cover and you open that flap and you know what, you see the book, you know, and you get it all right there. And I think that's just like such important and powerful representation. I really like what you said, Corinne, about the idea of like, because I guess that's true, you know, where like I did feel comforted just seeing those books, like, you know, and I think the idea, like, even if like it wasn't something that I would have felt comfortable taking home, it's just like it's a reminder that you're like wanted, you know.
I think,
totally.
Mark, you mentioned Dahlia Adler earlier. She actually runs like specific series about queer books that are not outwardly queer, specifically for like closeted kids who might want to read it but can't take a book like that home. And sometimes it's so tricky, like, oh yeah, you can do the paperback, but not the hardback. Like in my case, like my first book, Otherbound, there's nothing on the cover that signifies there's any kind of queer content. And then on the paperback, there's like massive text on the background, like winner of the Bisexual Book Award. And I'm like, okay, maybe that one's not so safe.
Right.
But also, do you feel that kind of stuff sometimes is important for the author? Because like, so for Phoenix, I actually asked them, we had so many amazing quotes that said that I said, can you put that on the cover, you know? Because for me, I guess that was like me being like, kind of like wanting that for myself, like wanting to, and feeling proud and wanting to have on my own book cover, like gay, you know? So like, I'm wondering if like, do you think like some of that is also a choice that we make as authors, right? Because I know, Adam, we talked about this a lot with your series, when you were kind of going back and forth and trying to figure things out and where you wanted, how you know, your thoughts about the cover. And I think that's a big thing we talked about. It's like, sometimes an author, like, in the flap copy, we need to feel that because we are still, I mean, all of us are young. We still like are looking for that representation ourselves.
Yeah, because I think it's tricky too, because I want like all our books to access queer readers, but I also want non-queer readers to be reading our books because that's how they can empathize for us, right? Like I will never forget in 2015 when I got a review from More Happy Than Not, where like someone picked up the book not realizing it was going to be gay. And they admitted to being homophobic, but they read the book and they were like, I still don't get the gay thing, but I'm not disgusted by it anymore. And like, that's a really bold thing for like this teenager to have like told me, right? But I'm like, I was so proud of them. It's like, cool. Like, I think in the next few years, you're really going to really develop your own line of thinking and understand that like you have to like unpack a lot of like, whatever your conservative upbringing was and everything. And so I want to make sure we're also like reaching those readers. They're not my priority, but it is something that you do think about when you're thinking about covers and world building and all this stuff. And it sometimes feels kind of Trojan horsey, because you want someone to like read this book. Like I tell people like, oh, if you're a fan of X-Men, read Infinity Son or whatever. And they have no idea that like 3 of the 4 narrators are queer. But they read it for the plot. And then they happen to realize that they can enjoy a book about queer people. They can enjoy a book about someone who is not a mirror of them, you know, that it's not another straight white cis boy story or whatever. And it's like, and hopefully they can like expand and broaden like their reading.
I mean, that's been my experience. That's been my experience too, because, you know, with Anger is a Gift, we have nothing on there's nothing on the cover, there's nothing in the copy. And that was an intentional thing because part of it was also like, I'm dealing with being a person of color and writing a book about police brutality. So my publisher was also like, let's do one thing. Like, let's just let them know about one thing. There is, I mean, that's the thing is like kids will read Anger as a Gift and be like, I was like, it's like a steamroller of gay. There's like gay everywhere, like in everything.
There's gay everywhere.
Everywhere. Like, and it's just a part of the framework. It's part of where they live. It's part of who these kids are or whatnot. And then with Each of Us a Desert, they were very, my publisher was very upfront. Like, we actually want to like hint at the romance very strongly, possibly even outright spoil who the romance is about. And I was actually really excited about that because I hadn't had a book where that was that upfront, where it's in the copy. Like it makes it very clear these 2 girls are destined for each other or whatnot. And so I love that you asked that question, Patrice, because that was actually a very affirming thing. Is I get why we did what we did with Anger as a Gift, and I'm very happy with that. But now I get a book where that is like upfront. Enemies to lovers is two girls. You know, two brown girls who speak Spanish too, which is like an extra bit of, you know, excitement for me. So I think it is something that all of us as queer authors, we're constantly thinking about, like, how do we put these things out in the world, and what is the message we're sending just from the packaging alone?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess I was thinking, like, you know, so many of us, and I know this from having read your books and talking to you, it's like we've written some of the, you know, like, you never want to say first because, like, you never really know, you know, but like, I think for a lot of us, we've written some of the first things that exist from our culture, you know, like, and I think when you're doing that, like, I personally have never seen myself exactly how, you know, I've seen like bits and pieces of myself represented, and there's certainly been queerness, but I haven't really seen like a fantasy novel with like Black girls and love and all these different elements I want to see. And it's like, that is also why it's important to us, because it's like, we're not just writing for readers, we're writing for ourselves. Like, we're also like breaking boundaries for our own selves, you know? And that's kind of why I was curious about that, if like, how it affects you too. Because I think it's a tricky line that we have to kind of walk as being queer, you know, because I think a lot of writers, like, I guess if you're like cis, white, and straight, you're just like, you're writing a book. Oh, like, this is so great. Like, I just wrote this. It's so fun. But like, I think we do have to think about, like, we do think about all these things, you know, we're thinking not just about queer readers, but about like straight readers. We're thinking about all this different stuff. I know, Aiden, your book just came out. Like, what about you?
I mean, yeah, I think when I started like getting interviews about Cemetery Boys, and they would be like, oh, like, one of the most popular questions I get from people was like, oh, when was the first time you saw yourself represented in media? And it turned into like this mental gymnastics of being like, okay, well, what's the first book where I can find like some part of my identity, and like cherry picking and being like, I guess this one. When in reality, I had never seen myself. I have never seen myself represented in media. Like, according to books and movies and television, like, people like me don't exist. And that's, for me, that kind of wish fulfillment came within writing Cemetery Boys and writing a character who was like me. And so that's the first time, like, I had to provide that for myself. Like, that was the first time I ever saw myself represented in media. So it's wild and it's super empowering. But I mean, I think when it comes to like figuring out like what stories to tell and how to pitch them and how they're accessible, I think we're basically just, what we're all saying is that we need more of everything. We need more queer stories. We need more queer books. So then we don't have to be having this internal struggle with ourselves of being like, well, let me think, is there enough stealth books out in the world? Should I be contributing to that list, or should I be contributing, you know?
Yeah, we can just write what we actually want to write at that point.
Exactly.
And I think that's also
so much mental gymnastics,
like,
definitely. Go.
The more books we have, that also makes it so much easier for authors who might not be out or might not know they're queer yet. Like, we've had these discussions so often. Like, I am a big proponent of own voices for reasons. I should have mentioned it in my intro. I coined own voices. Yay.
Yeah, I was like, for reasons, you mean you invented it? Like,
yes.
For reasons,
I was like, I'm going to make a reference. Wait, I should make sure people get that reference. Anyway, so yeah, like, I totally want more own voices books of all kinds, but with queerness especially, that can also be so tricky. And I don't want that policing to actually like hurt authors who might be queer. And so the solution to that is also just like have more. Like, if like we have tons and tons and tons of own voices queer books, then like the number of books that by authors that aren't queer, like, that just makes it so much easier for people who might want to write about this or might want to explore topics without feeling that same pressure of, I have to come out because X, Y, Z. And I feel that's also very important, because there are so many people like in like YA publishing alone who started writing books thinking, yes, I am cis and straight, and like a couple years later, it is very clear that they are neither of those. And I think that's really beautiful. You can like discover yourself through fiction like that and just explore these topics. And I really want to make sure that we remain like a very open industry to that.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. I also think, like, I guess I'm curious, because it's so funny. also like teaching at this like Rainbow Writers Workshop thing at this weekend, and I'm curious, like in terms of one of the writers kind of asked this interesting question that I guess I haven't put a lot of thought into, because I'm not really someone who is fond of labels, because I feel like labels have often like confined me, you know. But I'm curious, like, how do you, in terms of like writing craft, like how do you like define your characters in your books, right? Especially in like fantasy, you know, like do you label them as you would in a modern day? Do you feel like that's important to label your characters? Because I asked as someone who is like truly like, I think it's gonna be like, people definitely can like plop any label they want, because I'm like, I guess, you know, like I don't really think, you know, like I guess I don't ever think about what exactly my character's identities are. I'm just like, we like who we like, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I know the answer to that, but that's something that I'm encountering right now. I just sold this Aztec Percy Jackson Meets Hunger Games duology, and it's like pastoral. It's set in an alternate universe that's inspired by Aztec mythos. And the really cool thing about our culture, and then like its beginning, is that colonization is what came in and decided that gender queerness and like stuff like wasn't a real thing. So it's been really empowering to kind of go through and like look at these Aztec gods, and some of whom are like literally like bi gender and stuff like that. And then kind of figuring out, okay, well, how do I present this in the context of the book, because we don't have those labels around, you know. So it's like, so how do I present, because I want to show the reader this diversity, but it's kind of figuring out in a craft sense how to incorporate that. And it's been tricky.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, I wonder if, because I did the cheesiest thing that I feel like every fantasy approaching like groans about. It's like I literally had a festival scene where like people are dancing and they're just all making out with each other. And I was like, that's the only time. That's literally the only way I showed. Where it's like that thing where you're like, obviously, like, you know, being something does not mean like, you know, but it's like, yeah, I literally was like, I don't want to give a sermon about how gender is in this society, so I just am gonna like have this thing happen where people are gonna be like, oh, clearly they're all fine with each other, so I guess it's all cool in this world. But I'm sure they're bad. I don't know. I'm sure like, because like Adam, yours is like contemporary fantasy, so
yeah. So I get
I can't actually remember.
It's funny because I just recently rewatched Game of Thrones. I don't know why, but I like they don't use like the word gay, right? Like every time they want to refer to someone being gay, yeah, there's always some like offensive framing of it, you know, of which I won't get into here just to keep it PG. But like, but yeah, they don't use the word gay. They're not saying like, oh, he's bisexual, you know. It's that's like not happening in Game of Thrones. But with like Infinity Son, you know, like I think with like my bisexual shapeshifter or whatever, like I don't think I actually ever call him bisexual in the book. I just have him referring to attraction to different people, and I know that like I've put it out there that he's bisexual, and I'm really sitting here for the first time thinking like, I don't think Ness is ever like, I'm bisexual, but you know, it's also a first person perspective, and I don't sit around here thinking like, today I'm drinking my water as a gay man, you know, like it's just
why not? Not that attitude.
Thank you.
Yeah,
God,
I'm
you need to own
bad
that.
writing, but maybe I'm like bad gaying. I don't know. Like maybe I should like frame my gayness some more. But yeah, I don't. You know, I definitely I study the way that like writers who have that task of you know, like original worlds, like how you get that. Like Aiden, I'm so excited to see how it plays out in the Aztec games, as we'll call it for now.
That's good. Aztec games.
But yeah, but like Patrice, I mean, you have like Black lesbian vampire, right? So like, are you not using lesbian in it, or are you?
I honestly didn't even think about the fact that one of the characters is a lesbian. I think my agent picked on that. I just, you know, I just like, it literally, like once I found out that's how she pitched the book, that's when I started thinking about it. I was like, oh yeah. And I didn't realize it until someone, I don't even know, like someone else, I think it was like, yeah, no, she was like, oh, an editor brought it up. That's happened. And when I was doing editor calls, when people were offering, an editor was like, you know, it's so cool that all three of your POV characters are queer women. And I was like, She was like, you have no like cis men's POV. I was like, huh, I guess I don't. I guess they are all really queer. Like, So like, honestly, that's how it happened. It just like, I wanted to write a book in a certain way. And then I realized that like I had unintentionally like wrote like 3 queer Black women's POVs as the main characters, which is like pretty freaking awesome. But I didn't really address it. I mean, I don't address it. They all just refer to like people as like, they'll be like, oh, my wife or something like that, like, or whatever. Like there's like, like kind of similar to you were talking about, Aiden. Like, so in the book of in the world of my book, there are all these cultural myths and things I made up, a lot of them based on like Black Southern folklore and stuff like that. And all these stories and myths, like there are like, legends where it's like, oh, like there's this legend of like the sea that came to being after this woman like cried a lot after like mourning the loss of her wife, right? So it's all these things, but like that's kind of how I interwove into the world. It's like all of their like origin tales and all these things are all super queer. And so I just figured like, and I guess that was purposeful. But I guess when you're thinking about it in terms of like world building crafts, like I'm now like, I guess. But Kitty,
Look at, so
I
had
think I
a
was
real
super intentional about
problem.
it.
Yeah, I had a real hard problem with this coming from Anger is a Gift, which is contemporary, where everyone's identities, a lot of them say it out loud and they're very specific about it. And then going to secondary fantasy, where I was like, do these words even exist in this world? And they don't. And I decided that they don't.
Yeah.
I had the same thing where it's like the myths people tell. I'm going to have them so that they're not gendered in the way that they would normally be in our world or whatnot. One of my biggest problems actually, though, was in deciding to use Spanish as a fantasy language, is that Spanish is a colonized language, so it's extremely gendered. And so I was faced with this thing of, well, what do I do? Do I invent a new pronoun? Or how do I figure this out? Especially because the god of this world does not have a gender, and that's actually very important to the mythology. And that there are many people who are not considered a man or a woman in this world as well. So one of the things I defaulted to that was really fun was to just pick certain words, and they were just one gender the whole time. Everyone was used that specific. So like if something is masculine, it's el. If it's feminine, it's la. And so I would just use la for everything, la or la, for all of them or whatnot, and just have the standard where you don't have men who are offended by being referred to as a feminine pronoun or whatnot. But it was hard. Like once you start getting into that, then you start realizing like how deeply gendered our world is, how deeply heteronormative our world is. And you have to like approach it from a structural level and have, like I made it clear in the very beginning. Mine wasn't a dance. It was this village sitting around a fire. And there are 2 women who sing about leaving their husbands to go off and have a romance in the desert. They're just going to leave their husbands behind. And that was my way right at the beginning to be like, first of all, screw men, they're the worst. But also, like, women can end up together, and that's just how it is.
And that's just how it is.
Yeah. Corinne?
I mean, that's really smart.
Yeah, that's something I've also thought about a lot, because my first book is set partially in a secondary fantasy world, and the main character is bisexual. And I also never explicitly mention it there, and it's also just a very queer world, and not like gender roles are not really as much of a thing there. Yeah, that's something I think is like really cool to have, especially in these secondary fantasy or sci-fi worlds where we can normalize it and then make clear that like the emphasis that we have on it in our society now doesn't necessarily always have to apply. But I sometimes struggle with that, because there's also like the opposite, where certain words are like often avoided, like bisexual. Like so often it is just the word is not used in a way, even like in contemporary fiction and such, in a way that really makes it feel like it's being avoided on purpose for some reason. And like sometimes naming the word is also really important. Like there was a post recently, and I don't remember who it was, otherwise I would credit them, but they were looking at like how the word lesbian was used in fiction, and how often it was like either not used, it was just like turned into like likes girls or that, but not actually the word lesbian.
I read that post.
Or it was only used in like negative fashions, or someone else would be like, oh, are you a lesbian? They're like, I'm not sure. Like, and that is also something that like that label sometimes can be so very powerful to have. So I think that, and like in secondary worlds, there's also the question of like, we translate so many words, like in these secondary worlds, they're never actually talking English, they're never using our language. So we already have to translate words and concepts. And so it's very much like a question of like, would this concept exist here? And like, for some reason, using words like bisexual or gay or lesbian feel very modern in a way that doesn't always feel like it fits with the fantasy world, but that's also something that I like want to interrogate. Like, why is that? Because there's plenty of non-modern societies that did have words for these things, even if the concepts were somewhat different. So that's something I want to interrogate for myself. Like, why does this feel modern? And in that way, it's sort of similar to like autism, because like I wanted to write a far future sci-fi thing where a character was autistic, and I was like, would they have a word for it? Like, it doesn't really make sense that they wouldn't. But using the word autism somehow makes it feel way more contemporary and like more set in our world instead of like this distant feel. And that's also something where I just want to explore, like, why is this? And like, why do I hesitate to use that word? Why do I avoid it? And yeah, like I can see very much the pros and cons, and I just think like I want to keep interrogating it so I don't accidentally just fall into some trap without consciously making that decision.
It's wild that like this is a thing that we will continue to be interrogating through our work, because we're not like boring white straight cis men. You know, it's like like we have like all these like wonderful intersections like going for us that are, you know, incorporated within our queerness too, and we're constantly like interrogating all that as well. And like just hearing how some of us, the way that we are like studying language and every word to determine like if it has like a place in our world, and that's going to continue to evolve throughout our work, which I think is a beautiful thing, to be able to like track our growth and our contributions to the industry as well as we continue to expand it. We have 3 minutes left, so I don't really know how we want to spend it.
Oh my God, where's the time go?
Yeah, dance party.
We could like recommend books. I don't know. We could dance party. Sure.
Yeah. Oh my Lord. What books? I'm trying to think what queer books I've.
Yeah, and I'm like,
I have to look at my.
I have some. I'll go get some.
I will highly recommend Black Wings Reading by Alex London. That's I'm going to choose books that are not on this panel, but Black Wings Reading by Alex London is a big favorite of mine. It's a sibling story with a lot of queerness in it and killer falcons. So.
Go ahead, Corinne.
Even if we break, is very queer with trans and non-binary, and it's delicious thriller. And Darcy Little Batcher's Elazzo is great. Asexual character, murder mystery. There's a ghost dog. It's so cute and so good. And, yeah.
Elazzo is so good. It's so funny. Wow. Aiden, would you like to go next?
Aiden's ready.
We can't hear you, Aiden.
Aiden, we can't hear you.
We can't hear you.
You muted yourself.
You're muted. No.
Nope, can't hear you.
Well, hold up the books and we can read them out.
Yeah, we'll read. So there's Legendborn by Tracy Diaz. Okay, we set the dark on fire, Taylor K. Mejia. Felix Ever After by Kason Calendar. You also, if I remember, you had Legendborn. Everyone read Legendborn. Wayward Witch by Zoraida Cordova. Who Steals Spoons and then Plants Them on Me. Great book. Right. I have a. Oh wait, do you want to go next, Patrice? Or?
I have like books to show, so you can go if you.
Okay, I don't because this book is not. It's out June 8th next year. It's called 1500 Miles from the Sun by Johnny Garza. Please, all of you, read this incredible book. It's so good and so gay. And
it's out next year?
15 miles. Yeah, it's out next year. Okay. I just read it. I'm obsessed with it. It's so good. It's about a kid who gets so drunk and then accidentally comes out on Twitter. And it's just chaos. Gay.
That
the whole
sounds
book. It's
really
so good. It's so good. It's so good.
That is right.
Okay, all right. I'm gonna. Who's the publisher? I'll talk to you later.
Skyscape. Okay.
Okay.
Aiden is frustrated.
So my recs are Cinderella's Dead by Caitlin Barron. It's so good. It's literally like 200 years after Cinderella. All the girls in the kingdom have to go marry these men, and she's like, but I'm in love with my best friend. So they take down the patriarchy together. There's Ironheart by Nina Varela. Well, I'm really just yeah, okay. In the camera. And it's like Enemies to Lovers, slow burn. And then You Should See Me in a Crown, which has the best freaking premise ever, which is literally like this girl needs to, I didn't even know there was prom scholarship. So I guess in her school was like a prom scholarship. Girl needs like money for college, and she literally enters herself in as like kind of like dumpling vibes in that way, like enters herself in as prom queen, but then she falls in love with the person running against her. And it's just like the most amazing, hilarious, like laugh out loud.
So good.
It's just the absolute best.
I also want to correct this real quick. It's a whole series, Not Your Sidekick by C.B. Lee. It's like bisexual superheroes, and it's really, really fun.
We should like take a picture of our book sacks and like post them somewhere.
I think we've
Go
got
ahead,
to
Adam.
off, but thank you all so much for all your contributions to queer speculative literature and for this conversation. And love all of you and adore you and your books, and excited to see where we go in the next stage of queer speculative fiction. Thank you all.
Thanks, Adam.
What's up?
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all fans.
Thanks, Adam.
Y'all right.
Thanks, y'all fast.